My name is Delaney Brooks, and I'm 30 years old. 3 nights ago, I became the main character of a group chat full of people who barely knew me, and the punchline of my own relationship. That's not something you ever imagine when you're just trying to keep your life quietly under control. If you'd asked me a year ago to describe my life, I would have said it was solid. Not glamorous, not tragic. Just steady in a way I'd earned. One project, one late night, one promotion at a time. I work in IT consulting. I make decent money, keep myself in shape, and I've always been the kind of woman who minds her own business. I'm not the loudest person in the room, but I'm not invisible either. I like systems. I like knowing what's due when, what's in my savings, what my week looks like. For a long time, I thought I knew what I wanted, a stable relationship with someone genuine, maybe eventually a family. Nothing epic, nothing cinematic, just a life where the ground under my feet didn't shift every 5 minutes. I thought I'd found that with Connor West. We'd been dating for 8 months. We met at a mutual friend's rooftop barbecue last summer, the kind of party where the music is just a little too loud and someone inevitably decides flip cup counts as a personality trait. I was at the drink table, trying to pour flat rosé without spilling it on my sandals, when he slid in beside me. Button-down sleeves rolled to his forearms, mischievous smile, that easy confidence some men wear like a second skin. "If they make us do one more drinking game," he murmured, "I'm faking a medical emergency." I snorted. "Make it something dramatic. Maybe you're allergic to warm beer." He laughed, and it was nice. Not performative. Just amused, like he'd been waiting for someone to say exactly that. We clicked fast after that. Late-night conversations that stretched past midnight. Weekend walks where we held hands and talked about everything from childhood cartoons to career goals. After 4 months, I introduced him to my parents. My mom loved him. My dad said he had good energy, which is his rarest form of praise. I was falling hard, but there were signs I ignored. Little things. Connor checked his phone constantly when we were together. He'd flip it over, glance, type, then give me this apologetic grin. "Sorry, it's work," he'd say. Or, "Group chat, they're being idiots." Sometimes he'd turn the screen away just a little, not enough to be obvious, but enough that I noticed. He canceled plans last minute more than once, always with a reasonable excuse. A client emergency, a deadline that moved, a friend having a crisis. His mood could swing from warm and affectionate to distant and distracted overnight. One date, he'd be all in, talking about future trips we could take together. The next, he'd feel a million miles away. I told myself every relationship had rough patches. I told myself I was overthinking, that my brain was trying to find hairline cracks in something good because it didn't know what to do with stability. 3 weeks ago, everything shifted. It was a Friday night. We were supposed to meet at this trendy wine bar downtown that his friends loved, the kind of place with exposed brick, hanging plants, and tiny plates that cost more than my weekly groceries. Connor texted me to say he was already there with his friends and told me to dress a little up because they were celebrating someone's promotion. I got there around 8, wearing a green blouse he once said made my eyes look ridiculously pretty. I spotted him at a corner table with 3 people, Megan, Brooke, and a guy I didn't recognize. They were already laughing, glasses half empty, leaning into that pre-tipsy energy where everything seems funnier than it actually is. I walked over with a smile. "Hey, sorry I'm a bit late. Traffic was..." Megan looked up at me with a smirk. Wow, she actually came. I paused, still smiling, waiting for the joke to land in a place that made sense. Connor glanced at her, then at me. There was this split second where his expression was blank, not warm, not welcoming, just neutral, like I was an unexpected email in his inbox instead of his girlfriend. "Of course I came," I said lightly, sitting down. "Why wouldn't I?" Brooke let out a little giggle and looked at her wine. The guy stared at the table like he already regretted being there. Connor took a long sip of his drink. Then he set the glass down, leaned back, and looked me dead in the eye. "Delaney," he said, voice loud enough for the table to hear, "you really thought someone like me was ever going to seriously settle down with someone like you?" The table went very, very quiet. Megan's eyes widened, then she broke into these small, ugly snickers. Brooke covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. The guy looked away entirely. My ears started ringing. I stared at Connor, waiting for him to laugh, to say he was kidding, to do anything that suggested this was some twisted attempt at humor that had overshot the mark. He just shrugged, like he was explaining a simple math problem. "I mean," he continued, gesturing lazily between us, Look at my life. Look at yours. We had fun, but come on. Did you really think this was long term? Every word landed like a slap. It wasn't just what he said, it was the rehearsed feel of it, the way Megan's smirk had slid into place before he even finished. Like they'd talked about this, like I'd been turned into a storyline in some private show where I didn't know I was the joke. My chest tightened, my face went hot. The air around us felt thick and sticky. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my drink in his face. I didn't ask why or how he could or what I'd done wrong. I just stopped. Something inside me went very still. It was the stillness you feel when you finally recognize a pattern you've been refusing to see. I stood up, careful, deliberate. My chair scraped against the floor. A couple at the next table glanced over. "Good," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Then this is the last time you'll ever have to see me." I picked up my bag. For a second, I thought I saw something flicker across Connor's face. Surprise, maybe. Regret. Or maybe I only wanted to see that. Megan made a soft wow sound under her breath. Brooke stared at her napkin like it might save her. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for him to call my name. I just pushed through the noise and the clink of glasses and the low murmur of conversations that had nothing to do with my world collapsing in the corner. Outside, the air was cold and smelled like rain and exhaust. I got in my car, drove home on autopilot, and sat on my couch in the dark for 2 hours, replaying the whole thing in my head like a movie I hadn't agreed to star in. I didn't cry right away. I was too numb, too confused. 8 months. I'd met his parents. I'd helped him move apartments. I'd listened to him talk about his insecurities, his childhood, the ways he felt like he'd never be enough. And this was how it ended. Me as a punchline he'd been workshopping with his friends. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hey, this is Tara. I'm one of Connor's friends from tonight. I'm so sorry about what happened. You didn't deserve that." I stared at the message. My first instinct was to delete it, block the number, erase anyone orbiting Connor from my life and pretend none of them existed. Instead, I typed back, "Why are you texting me?" 3 dots appeared. "Because what he did was wrong. And there's more you should know. Not to hurt you more, because you deserve the truth. Can we talk tomorrow?" My hands froze above the screen. "There's more you should know." The words nested in my chest like something with sharp edges. Part of me wanted to ignore her. I'd been humiliated enough. I didn't need bonus content. Another part of me, the part that still couldn't stop scanning the last 8 months for clues, needed answers. At 2 in the morning, I finally replied. "Coffee shop on 5th and Alder. Noon tomorrow." Her response was instant. "I'll be there, thank you." I set my phone down, lay back on the couch, and stared at the ceiling until my eyes finally burned. I didn't know it yet, but Tara wasn't just one of Connor's friends. She was the beginning of the truth. The coffee shop on 5th and Alder is one of those places that always smells like roasted beans and sugar, even when no one's eating. By 11:45 the next morning, I was sitting at a corner table by the window, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I wasn't drinking, watching strangers pass by like they were in a different universe. My stomach twisted every time the door opened. At exactly noon, she walked in. I recognized her, but it took my brain a minute to place her without the dim lighting and the wine glass. Tara. Dark hair pulled back into a low bun, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. Last night she'd been in a fitted dress and heels. Today she wore jeans, a loose sweater, and sneakers. Smaller somehow. Or maybe just stripped of the armor. She spotted me, hesitated, then ordered a tea at the counter. When she walked over, she clutched the mug like it might steady her. "Hi," she said softly. "Delaney?" "Yeah." My voice sounded flatter than I meant it to. "You're Tara." She sat down across from me and exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath since the door. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I know I'm probably one of the last people you want to see." "You're not wrong," I said. "So why am I seeing you?" She flinched a little, then nodded like she thought I deserved to be sharper than that. "What happened last night," she started, "was awful." I couldn't stop replaying it. I barely slept. I kept thinking, if that had been me, if someone had done that to me, and my friends just sat there. She broke off, jaw tightening. I let the silence sit between us for a second. "Why did he do it?" I asked. "If you know." Tara stared into her tea as if the answer might be floating in it. "I don't know exactly. I have theories, but I don't know what was going through his head in that exact moment." "That makes 2 of us." She swallowed. "I've known Connor for a long time, longer than you've been together. Something in her tone made the hairs on my arms stand up. How long? 4.5 years. I blinked. You've been friends that long? Her eyes lifted to mine, and there was so much guilt there I knew the answer before she said it. I'm his ex, she said quietly. We dated for almost 2 years. The words dropped between us like a stone. For a second, the sounds of the coffee shop, milk steaming, low conversations, spoons clinking, faded out. All I could hear was a rushing in my ears. You're his ex, I repeated, slower. And I met you for the first time last night? She nodded. We broke up 3 years ago. We stayed in the same friend group. It was complicated, unhealthy, but familiar. The back of my neck prickled. Did he tell you about me? Yes, she said. From the beginning. I knew your name, that you worked in IT, that you have your life together more than he does. His words, not mine. She gave a humorless little laugh that died almost immediately. I knew he was serious about you, or as serious as he's capable of being. I didn't know whether to be nauseous or furious. Maybe both. Why did you stay in his life, I asked. If he's like that, if you knew what he was capable of. Tara winced. Because I'm not a hero in this story either. I stayed friends with him and Megan and Brooke out of habit. History. Fear of being alone. We'd been a unit for so long that it was easier to pretend the bad parts weren't that bad. She set her tea down and folded her hands like she was bracing herself. But last night was different. He crossed a line I can't pretend I didn't see. My fingers tightened around my mug. What line? Humiliating your girlfriend in public? Making her feel like an idiot in front of your friends? That line? I know, she said, voice cracking. I know. That's why I texted you. I took a breath, forcing my lungs to keep working. You said there was more I should know. What does that mean, exactly? Tara looked down, then up again, as if deciding how honest to be. Connor has patterns, she said. He's been seeing a therapist for the last year, on and off. He told us it was about stress, but I overheard enough to know it was about commitment. Whenever things start to get real, he panics. He picks fights, cheats, runs, or, she gestured vaguely, does something nukes the bridge like last night. Has he done that before? I asked. What he did to me? Not exactly like that, she admitted. But close. With me, he pulled away for weeks, then suddenly told me he'd never really seen us as long-term. He did it at a party, in front of our whole group. It wasn't as scripted as last night, but it was humiliating. After, he told everyone he had to, because I was too attached. A bitter taste rose in my throat. Guess he refined the performance for me. That's what it felt like, she whispered. I stared at her. So last night, when he said those things, when you all laughed, what was that? Her face crumpled. I didn't laugh because I thought it was funny. I laugh because I freeze when I'm uncomfortable. Because I've spent years letting him get away with being cruel by pretending it's just his sense of humor. And because I am a coward. Her honesty stunned me more than a defensive denial would have. I left the group chat this morning, she added. Megan and Brooke are furious. Connor called me dramatic, but I can't do it anymore. I can't watch him wreck people and keep pretending it's normal. Did he say anything about me? After I left, I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Tara hesitated. Yes. Something in my chest clenched. What did he say? He told the chat he finally ended it, and that he felt free, she said softly. He said you were getting too serious, that he couldn't breathe. Megan wrote a bunch of laughing emojis. Brooke said it was savage. My vision blurred for a second. I blinked hard. I told them it wasn't okay, Tara went on, voice shaking now. I told them it was cruel. Megan said I was being too sensitive. Connor said you'd get over it. That's when I realized I couldn't stay. I left the chat. Then I sat on my couch for an hour, staring at your contact in our group notes, trying to decide if I should reach out. And you did, I said. And I did, she repeated, because you seemed like a good person. And I watched him destroy something that looked good because he's too scared to sit with his own fear. I've watched him do it before, but never that publicly. And I realized that every time I stayed quiet, every time I smoothed things over or laughed along, I was part of the problem. She gripped her mug tighter. I'm not telling you this to absolve myself. I just needed you to know it wasn't about you not being enough. It was about him not being capable. Right now, at least. We sat there in silence. I studied her face, the guilt, the exhaustion, the way she seemed almost relieved to say it out loud. Why are you really telling me this? I asked finally. You could have just disappeared. Because if I were you, Tara said, I'd be sitting at home replaying every moment, trying to figure out what I did wrong. wondering why I wasn't enough. I know what that feels like. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I looked at this woman who had dated my boyfriend, who had watched him break women and then kept inviting him to brunch. She was not simple, not villain or angel, just messy and human and trying, too late, to do the right thing. Thank you, I said slowly, for telling me. I don't know what to do with all of it yet, but thank you. She nodded, eyes shining. I'm sorry I didn't say anything last night. I should have spoken up. Instead, I just sat there. I hate that you saw me that way first. I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe there wasn't one. If you ever need to scream about him, or ask questions, or just rage text, she added, sliding her phone out, you can reach out. No pressure. She typed quickly, then turned the screen so I could see. My name was already in a message draft. She sent a text, just her name and a tiny coffee cup emoji, a strange kind of receipt. My phone buzzed in my bag. I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to, she said, standing, but the offer's there. When she walked out, I sat alone, staring at the condensation sliding down my coffee cup. Later that day, when the adrenaline faded and the silence in my apartment got too loud, I did something I almost never do. I called my older brother. Mitchell lives 3 hours away with his wife and 2 kids. We're close, but our conversations are usually about football scores, funny TikToks his kids send him, or which of us dad roasted harder in the family group chat that week. Feelings are not our shared language. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, Lainey, everything okay? I hadn't realized I was crying until I opened my mouth and my voice came out small. Not really, I said. I need advice. There was a pause, then the sound of a door closing on his end. Okay, he said, voice shifting into a softer gear I rarely heard. Talk to me. What happened? So I did. I told him everything. The rooftop barbecue, the 8 months, the meeting with my parents, the wine bar, the sentence that sliced through me, the way his friends had laughed, Tara's text, the coffee shop, the group chat messages. I expected him to immediately tell me Connor was garbage, to jump straight into big brother outrage. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment. How are you feeling right now? He asked. I stared at the wall. Confused, I said. Humiliated, angry, sad, all of it. I keep replaying it, trying to figure out what I missed, what I did wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, Mitchell said firmly. Someone treating you like trash doesn't mean you are trash. It just means they're the kind of person who thinks that's okay. Everyone saw it, I whispered. His friends, people at other tables. I just stood there. You stood there, he said, and then you walked away with your head up. That's not nothing. I wiped my eyes. It doesn't feel brave. It feels empty. I get that, he said. I never told you this, but something similar happened to me in college. I frowned. What? There was this girl, he said, a faint smile in his voice. We'd been seeing each other almost a year. She dumped me at a party in front of half the campus, told everyone I was boring, and she'd been with someone else the whole time. I wanted the ground to open up. I sat up. You never told me that. Yeah, well, it wasn't my favorite story, he said. I spent weeks wondering what was wrong with me. Stopped going out, let my grades tank. Finally, my roommate sat me down and said, You're letting her hurt you twice. She hurt you once when she did it. Now you're doing the rest. I closed my eyes. So what are you saying? I'm saying you're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to grieve. But don't let this define you, he said. Don't build your whole reflection around the worst thing someone ever did to you. What if I can't stop thinking about it? I whispered. You will. Not today, not tomorrow, he said. But you will if you keep living your life, if you don't let him shrink your world. We talked for almost an hour. He told me how he eventually moved past his own humiliation, how he met his wife 2 years later, how that awful night became a filter for what he would never accept again. By the time we hung up, my chest still hurt, but there was a little more air in it. After the call, I sat on my bed, phone in my hand, staring at Tara's name in my messages. For a long time, I didn't move. Then slowly I typed, I appreciate you telling me the truth. I'm still angry, but I'm glad I know. I hit send before I could overthink it. That night, I slept. Not well. But for the first time since the wine bar, I didn't wake up gasping. I didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of something I hadn't expected. The slow, messy work of rebuilding. And Tara, the ex-girlfriend of my ex-boyfriend, was going to be part of it. For the next few days, time moved strangely, like I was watching my own life from behind glass. Monday morning, I woke up with the heaviness still sitting on my chest. I texted my manager that I needed a personal day, then curled up under the blanket and let the hours blur. I ate leftover takeout. I scrolled aimlessly. I stared at the ceiling until the shadows on it changed shape. Every few minutes, the wine bar replayed like a cruel short film. Connor's voice, the laughter, Megan's smirk. By evening, I felt wrung out, but no lighter. Tuesday, I forced myself to shower, put on real clothes, and go to the gym. I lifted half my usual weight and still felt shaky, but at least it was motion. At least it was something. When I got home, there was a message from Tara. "Have you eaten today?" I stared at it for a while before replying simply, "Yeah, thanks." She didn't push. Wednesday, I went back to work. Walking into the office felt like stepping into a world that still expected me to be functional and articulate, and for a moment I panicked that everyone would somehow know. But the office hummed with its usual rhythm, people tapping keyboards, printers whirring, quiet conversations about deadlines and software updates. By 11 a.m., my facade cracked just enough that Paula, my manager, noticed. She found me at the coffee machine, staring into my mug like it might fill itself. "You okay?" she asked gently. "You look tired." "Break up," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm fine." Paula studied me for a second, her expression softening. "Take the time you need, Delaney. Heartbreak is brutal. It knocks the wind out of you. If you need a lighter workload this week, tell me." Her kindness hit me harder than I expected. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. After work, I called my mom and told her Connor and I had broken up. She asked if he'd cheated. I said no. She asked what happened. I kept it vague. She sighed in that way moms sigh when they want details but don't want to push too hard. My dad just said, "His loss." Then immediately launched into complaining about our local football team's terrible defense this season, and it was the most comforting thing in the world. But it wasn't until Thursday night, 4 days after the wine bar, that something inside me shifted. I was standing in my kitchen, meal prepping, because Mitchell had reminded me to keep routines going, when my phone buzzed. "Tara, I started therapy today." Real therapy. Not just the "my friends are toxic" venting. Felt awful but good. "You holding up?" I hesitated, then typed, "Trying. It still hurts a lot." She replied almost instantly. "Of course it does. What he did would have broken anyone." I leaned against the counter and let that sink in. Anyone. It felt like permission to breathe. We texted for another 10 minutes. Not about Connor, but about normal things. Books, shows, the ridiculousness of grocery store prices. Somehow that helped. Across the next week, life wobbled toward normal. I went to the gym every morning. Sometimes I cried in the car before going in, but I still went. I focused on work, I meal prepped, I watched comfort shows. I let myself grieve in small bursts instead of avalanches. Little by little, it felt less like survival and more like recovery. About 2 weeks after the wine bar, something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store aisle comparing 2 brands of pasta, trying to decide which one felt emotionally stable enough for dinner, when someone behind me said, "Delaney?" My stomach dropped. I turned. It was Connor. He looked different. Tired, less polished, like the sharp edges of his confidence had dulled. His hair was unstyled, his shirt wrinkled, but his eyes looked haunted. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low. "Just for a minute, please." Every logical part of my brain said walk away. Every emotional part said run. But the curious part, the part that still didn't understand how a person could flip so quickly, won out. "Fine," I said. "1 minute." We stepped to the side of the aisle. He set down his basket, rubbed the back of his neck, and swallowed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "What I did was unforgivable. I know that. I don't expect you to forgive me." I said nothing. "I've been in therapy," he continued, "trying to figure out why I blow up my own happiness anytime something starts to feel real. My therapist says it's fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of being trapped, fear of choosing wrong and ruining everything. Whatever it is, it doesn't excuse what I did." His voice cracked slightly. "But I needed you to know it wasn't about you. None of it was, idea." I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt too many things at once to identify any of them. "You humiliated me in front of your friends," I said. "You made me feel small, like I was a joke." "I know," his eyes dropped. "I've hated myself every day since." I didn't tell him Tara had already filled me in, but watching him grappling with his own guilt didn't feel satisfying. It felt sad and late. So late it almost didn't matter. "Did you mean what you said in the group chat?" I asked. "About feeling free?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I said that because I was panicking," he whispered. "Because Megan was hyping me up and I didn't want to admit I felt like garbage. I thought if I pretended I didn't care, maybe I'd believe it." That sounds like your pattern, I said. He winced again. A silence stretched between us. Long, awkward, heavy. I'm trying to be better, he said finally. I'm not asking for another chance. I know I don't deserve one. I just needed you to hear me say I'm sorry. I nodded slowly. Thank you, I said. I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change anything. I know. He picked up his basket. I picked up mine. Goodbye, Delaney, he said quietly. Goodbye, Connor. I walked away first. My hands were shaking, but not from pain. From closure. Real closure. Not the kind people gift you in movies, but the kind you give yourself by deciding what you'll no longer carry. That night, I called Mitchell. He apologized, I said. How do you feel about that? My brother asked. I don't know, I said honestly. It felt sad, but not for me, for him. That makes sense, Mitchell said. People can be broken without being evil, but that doesn't mean you go back and glue the pieces together. Do you think people can change? I asked. He paused. Maybe, if they want to, if they do the work. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is you. His words settled into me like warm weight. When we hung up, I realized something. Connor no longer had a piece of me. Not the part that cared, not the part that wondered, not the part that wished things had ended differently. The wound was still there, but it wasn't open anymore. A few more weeks passed. Life steadied. I got promoted, nothing huge, but enough to feel like forward motion. I joined a weekly local pickup volleyball game after work, something I hadn't done in years. I made new acquaintances. I cooked more. I slept better. My world stretched a little wider. And Tara and I, strangely unexpectedly, continued talking. Coffee every other week. Texts about therapy. Little updates on life. She seemed lighter with each passing day, as if cutting ties with Megan and Brooke had untangled years of tension. One afternoon in early spring, we sat at a cafe, and Tara looked at me with this bright, excited expression I'd never seen on her. I joined a hiking group, she said. They're doing a weekend trip next month. Camping, bonfire, actual mountains instead of YouTube videos of mountains. That sounds amazing, I said, sipping my tea. She hesitated. There's someone in the group I think you'd like. I blinked. Tara. Not like that, she said quickly. Okay, maybe a little like that. But no pressure. He's just genuinely great. His name is Noah, graphic designer, loves sci-fi. Kind of awkward in an endearing way. Very not Connor. I raised an eyebrow. Is this a setup? Only if you want it to be, she said, smiling. Look, you've done so much healing. You rebuilt your entire foundation. Maybe it's time to add something new to it, or at least go on a hike and breathe some air that doesn't smell like someone else's trauma. I didn't answer right away. A few months earlier, I would have said no instantly. But now, I wasn't the same woman who had walked out of the wine bar with mascara smudged under her eyes and humiliation sitting like a stone in her stomach. I was steadier, stronger, curious about what life looked like without fear. Finally, I said, okay, I'll go. Tara grinned, like I'd just handed her a winning lottery ticket. You won't regret it, she said. I hoped she was right. The first morning of the hiking trip felt like stepping into someone else's life, someone braver, someone lighter, someone who had survived something sharp and walked forward anyway. Tara picked me up at 7. She had coffee waiting in the cup holder and a playlist labeled Hiking, but Make It Emotionally Healing. I laughed for the first time that morning, an actual laugh, not the brittle kind I'd been forcing for months. The drive to the mountains took 3 hours. By the time the trees thickened and the air cooled, I could feel my shoulders loosening, like my body knew something was shifting even before my mind caught up. When we arrived at the trailhead, the hiking group was already gathering. 12 people, different ages, different builds, but all wearing that relaxed, outdoorsy confidence that made them seem immediately approachable. Some were adjusting backpacks, others passing around sunscreen or rearranging gear. And then there was him, Noah Ellis. He stood near the back of the group, tightening the straps on his pack. Dark hair, soft but expressive eyes, a little stubble, the kind of smile that looked unpracticed but warm when it finally appeared. He wore a gray long-sleeve shirt and hiking boots that had clearly seen real trails, not Instagram ones. Tara nudged me lightly. That's him. I gathered, I whispered. When Noah looked up and saw us approaching, he smiled, the gentle, slightly shy kind that hits warmer than confidence. Hey, Tara said. This is Delaney, the friend I told you about. His eyes flicked to me, and for a moment I felt exposed, like he could see all the things I'd been hiding under composure and routine. But instead of judgment, there was curiosity. Nice to meet you, he said. Tara said you're new to hiking, but willing to risk your ankles for the cause. Tara gasped dramatically. That's not what I said. Noah shrugged. That's what I heard. Something loosened in me. Maybe laughter, maybe gravity. It's okay, I said. My ankles and I have accepted our fate. That earned a grin from him. Wide this time, real, and something in my chest flickered awake. The hike was steep, long, and filled with just enough challenge to keep me anchored in the present moment. The air smelled like pine and earth. The sunlight filtered through the canopy in shifting gold patterns. Every step felt like peeling back a layer I didn't realize was still wrapped around me. Noah hiked a few feet behind me at first, giving me space but keeping pace in a way that felt intentional. Halfway up the trail, I slowed to adjust my water bottle strap, and he paused beside me. You doing okay? He asked. This part's intense the first time. I'm good, I said, breathless but honest. Better than I expected. Same, he said. First time I did this trail, I thought I was going to pass out and leave my body to haunt the mountain. I laughed. At least you'd have a scenic haunting. That's what I told myself. Conversation flowed easily after that. Low, comfortable, and unforced. We talked about everything from favorite movies, he has an almost aggressive love for sci-fi, to terrible teenage fashion choices. He told me about his job as a graphic designer, how he freelanced from home and sometimes forgot to speak to another human for 12-hour stretches. At one point, Tara looked over her shoulder at us and mouthed, "See?" I gave her a look that translated to, "Stop it." But she wasn't wrong. Something about Noah's presence felt safe. Not boring, not predictable, just steady in a way that didn't demand anything from me. No performance, no pretending, no shrinking myself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. And that safety felt new and fragile and terrifyingly hopeful. That evening, we set up camp near a ridge overlooking the valley. The sunset flooded the horizon with deep oranges and pinks, the kind of colors that make you believe in things again. A bonfire crackled in the center of the clearing. People sat in a circle, eating, talking, stretching sore muscles. I sat with a bowl of instant noodles in my hands, staring into the flames like they might rearrange my thoughts for me. Noah sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth from his arm, but not so close that it felt crowded. After a few minutes, he asked quietly, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. Then, because it was true but incomplete, "Better than I've been in a while." He nodded, like he understood the unspoken parts too. The conversation drifted to relationships. Someone joked about dating apps. Someone else told a story about their ex insisting kombucha could cure depression. And then Noah spoke. "I used to stay with people longer than I should have," he said softly, "because I didn't want to fail, or because I was scared of starting over, or because I thought if I just gave them a little more time, they'd stop hurting me." My chest tightened. Not painfully, but in that way wounds react when someone brushes too close to them. "I get that," I said, "too well." He looked at me then, not scanning, not analyzing, just seeing. "You don't have to tell me," he said, "but if you ever want to, I'd listen." The gentle offer made my throat close. Later, when most people were asleep and the fire had burned to glowing embers, I found myself talking, quietly, haltingly, about the basics, about being with someone who could be charming one day and cold the next, about the wine bar, about the words that still sometimes echoed when I was tired. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet, but enough. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say, "Wow, what a jerk." He didn't reach for cliches like, "You'll find someone better." He just listened, fully. When I finished, he said softly, "I'm glad you walked away. That takes more strength than people realize." I looked at him, startled. It didn't feel like strength. He shook his head. "Strength usually doesn't feel like strength when you're in it. It just feels like surviving." A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding slipped out of me. For the first time in months, I felt something quiet and warm settle inside me. Not love, not infatuation, but possibility. By the end of the weekend, Noah and I had exchanged numbers. No pressure, no assumptions, just an easy promise to stay in touch. The next week, he texted me, "Survived Monday. Barely. Tell me you at least had better coffee than I did." We met for dinner the following Friday. Then a movie, then another dinner. We took it slow, careful, intentional. I told him I wasn't ready to rush anything. He said that was perfect because he wasn't in a hurry either. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared of the things I felt. Not because they were overwhelming, but because they were kind. Stable, steady, something I didn't have to earn by sacrificing myself. Nearly a year passed. A year since the wine bar. A year since the sentence that carved itself into my chest. A year since the night I walked out of a room where I'd been turned into a punchline. But the strange thing about distance is how it dulls the edges of memory, how something that once felt like the end of you becomes a story you can hold without shaking. Life didn't snap back all at once. It rebuilt itself quietly, routine by routine, choice by choice, breath by breath. My work steadied, my confidence grew back grain by grain, my world widened. And Noah became the part of my life that didn't hurt. By month 3, we'd established an easy rhythm, slow, gentle, steady. Friday dinners, where we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. Sunday hikes, even small ones, that became our shared ritual. Weeknight calls where we'd ramble about terrible graphic design trends or the absurdity of corporate jargon. We didn't rush titles. We didn't force milestones. We let things unfold without gripping too tightly. Then one night in early summer, he sat across from me at the tiny booth of a ramen shop and said, "I'd really like to call you my girlfriend if that's something you want." It was, and it didn't scare me. Not because I forgot what I'd been through, but because I'd finally healed enough to trust myself again. By month 6, he met my parents. My mom loved him. My dad, who'd said Connor had good energy, looked Noah up and down, nodded and said, "Yeah, he's solid." High praise for him. Noah wasn't flashy or unpredictable. He wasn't performative affection or love bombing or emotional turbulence. He was consistent, warm, patient, communicative. When he was anxious, he said so. When he cared, he showed it. When he didn't know what I needed, he asked. The complete opposite of Connor's emotional booby traps and disappearing acts. I didn't realize how soothing emotional safety could be until I had it. Tara and I stayed friends too, in a strange, poetic symmetry neither of us expected. She was thriving, happier, healthier, dating a kind, quiet guy she'd met through the hiking group. We saw each other less often now, not out of distance, but out of growth, out of having full lives again. One afternoon, over iced lattes, she said, "I can't believe how different things feel now. A year ago, I didn't realize how small my world had become." I knew exactly what she meant. Leaving her old friend group hadn't just freed her, it had cracked something open. She wasn't trapped in the same emotional patterns anymore. She didn't orbit Connor or Megan or Brooke. She had her own life again. We had survived the same man in different ways, and somehow that made us closer than either of us ever expected. And then came the quiet closure I didn't know I still needed. It happened on an ordinary Saturday in late summer. Noah and I were in line at a coffee shop, the kind with brick walls and mismatched mugs and a chalkboard menu that looked like a graphic designer's fever dream. I was telling him about a ridiculous client request. "Can we make the software more blue?" And he was laughing under his breath. As we moved forward in line, the door opened. I turned. Connor walked in. He looked fine. Not great. Not miserable. Just a guy with a to-go cup and a distracted expression. When his eyes landed on me, he froze. For a second, time stretched. Then he gave me a small, almost sad smile. Not mocking, not smug, just human. I nodded politely. Nothing more. Noah glanced at me, checking without asking if I was okay. I was. More than okay. Connor and I didn't exchange words. No dramatics, no tension, no longing, no pain. Just two people who used to know each other, standing in separate lines, living separate lives. And that moment, quiet, undramatic, felt like closure. Real closure. The kind you don't get from conversations or apologies or explanations. The kind that comes when your life has become bigger than your wound. Later that night, curled up on my couch with Noah's arm around me and a movie playing softly, I realized something. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want an apology recap. I didn't even want understanding. I wanted peace. I wanted growth. I wanted my life back. And I had it. Not because I waited for someone else to fix what they broke, but because I chose to rebuild the parts of myself their damage couldn't reach. Because I kept going. Because I surrounded myself with people who cared. Because I didn't let someone hurt me twice, once with their actions, and again with my own self-doubt. People sometimes ask me if I've forgiven Connor. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but I have let go. He was a lesson, a mirror, a turning point. He showed me exactly who he was, and I showed myself who I could be once I stopped shrinking to fit inside someone else's chaos. I hope he's doing better. I hope therapy helped. I hope he stops blowing up the good things in his life. But whether he does or doesn't isn't my concern anymore. I'm focused on my life now, on Noah, on my work, on the friendships I've built, on the version of myself who walked into that wine bar and the version who walked out stronger. A year ago, I thought humiliation was the end of my story. It wasn't. It was the turning point. The moment I realized I deserved better, and then chose it again and again, every day after. And that quiet, steady growth is the real ending. Or maybe the beginning.